balance of the program. He's a radio host. He's a well known on the radio. He's also an author, columnist, blogger, and we're glad to have him with us here on American Family Radio. Chuck, welcome to today's
Thank
issues.
you, Ray. Great pleasure and honor as always. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your radio program and your blogging and all the rest of the stuff you do.
Well, I've been at it for about 15 years now, and I'm sure you have the same experience as I as you do a radio program and you get in touch with issues, you study issues more deeply. You realize that we need to debug ourselves in many ways from what we're taught and what we're spoon-fed as children and in the society. And it's like an ever-peeling onion. I'm always learning more and more about how our political system works, how our society works, and why. And it's an education on top of any formal education one could get, and I'm very dedicated to that.
Chuck, tell us a little bit about Obamacare. I mean, we are heading now toward when these exchanges, people are supposed to sign up soon for that, and parts of it are supposed to go into place in 2014. Let me just ask you a simple question. From where you
Mhm.
sit, is Obamacare a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, I think it's obviously a bad idea, as most Americans, both left and right, seem to think in the literal sense. Obama has given exemptions to it to his friends. Big union is an exemption. Apparently Native Americans and Muslims have exemptions. If you're lucky enough to have a business in Nancy Pelosi's district, you get an exemption. But the rest of us are going to be saddled, our businesses, and eventually you and I are going to be saddled with this enormous new obligation, this new tax. We know that the Department of Housing and Health and Human Services is actually hiring special agents who are going to go out and enforce this and paying them pretty well to do it and train them. And that could lead to jail sentences for people who do not comply. So it's a very troubling, centralized control over something that is the most intimate decision an individual can make, which is over his or her own health. And of course, Sarah Palin was absolutely right to blow the alarm about death panels. They've got in place this system where every single American citizen is going to get what's called a Corey score. And that means that if your Corey score isn't high enough, based upon various factors like your age and whatnot, then you're not going to get it doled out to you as good a health care treatment for your disease as someone who has a better Corey score. Now, if that isn't a death panel, I don't know what is.
What else do you think that the American people really don't know about Obamacare that is coming our way that that may really shock them or surprise them?
Well, at this point, it probably isn't going to surprise people to know that Obamacare involves the gathering of a massive amount of personal data on every single American from birth till death, and the placement of that data in huge computer systems as part of this big system that's being built right now in Utah. So that in that way, they're going to know everything about every single aspect of your health, things that are none of the government's business. This is a private matter. It's like the difference. It should be the same as a consultation between a minister and a parishioner, between a client and a lawyer. These are private issues that should be only the business of your medical personnel and not the government. And there are going to be consequences to having the government know so much about every aspect of our lives. There's nothing positive in that for the individual. We need to understand that we get nothing out of that. That's not a good development for anybody.
Are you for defunding?
Yes, oh, absolutely. I mean, now that Supreme Court Judge Roberts has traitorously declared Obamacare as a tax, that's the only way to go. I mean, that's the only way we're going to stop it. We have Republicans now who voted 100% against it in 2010, which should tell you that it's our issue as Republicans. And if they get off the reservation now and they get wobbly and they decide not to do this, that's going to not only hurt them in their re-elections in the House, but it's going to hurt the entire Republican Party because we have a moral stand on this. We completely rejected it. Every single Republican And we have to stand by that and do so courageously in spite of the fact that we're going to undergo withering assaults, of course, from the liberal media establishment and whatnot.
Chuck, well, what do you say to people who say, maybe, wow, I can't believe you conservatives are talking about, defunding Obamacare, and I mean, it was duly passed law and signed by the president, and and now it stands to offer health care coverage for 35 million Americans who didn't have health care coverage, and now you guys just you're just being obstructionist, and you don't care about people who don't have health care. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, it was passed under some very dubious circumstances. There was some real strong arming going on. Secondly, it's not likely to insure any more Americans than are insured now. It's only going to raise the cost to every single citizen. And thirdly, Republicans need to do a better job of presenting alternatives. We need to present, and do so courageously, free market alternatives that will lower the premiums of health care. Like, for example, why can't businesses bundle their resources and purchase health care as a major group, form what's called centros in South America, where people can get together, individuals and businesses, and they can form an organization and purchase health care on their own. There are a couple of groups that are doing this, and they basically provide health care to their participants based upon capital that they have. They've been given an exemption by Obamacare, including some good Christian groups. We need to make that legal. That's been banned in this country. There are other modalities that could be employed on the private sector that would lower the cost of premiums. Like, for example, on the state level, get the government out of the business of mandating health insurance for things other than catastrophic care. Those raise the cost of premiums for people. There's nothing wrong with getting an extra rider to your policy if you want to have coverage for, the breast implants or whatever. But why should all of the taxpayers pay for that? Get those mandates or those special interests that demand those put in law, get them out of the health insurance business. Let them offer their products on the open market, and premiums will go down. Health costs will go down. The answer isn't to nationalize the industry. The answer, if anything, is to further privatize the industry.
Clearly one of the president's strategies has been to enact this, put off part of it, put off another part of it, delay part of it, and then let the whole thing roll along until it's almost impossible to turn it back. Have we reached, Chuck, in your opinion, the point of no return, or is there still time to turn this thing around? And if so, how do we get it done?
No, I don't think we have. In fact, I'm encouraged by the fact that the administration put it off until after the midterm, because they've been getting complaints from Democrats who know how unpopular it is and who don't want to run on it. That tells you that this thing very well may never happen, because after the midterm, if they're able to sneak by, and there are some serious constitutional questions around whether the president can simply delay a law that's been passed. But he did that, and once the midterms are over, then they've got the general election. Do Democrats want to run on it then? I mean, ultimately, they're going to have to stand up and run on it, and it's not popular, which might mean that it'll never happen. But in order for that really to take effect, Republicans are going to have to stand tough, and they're going to have to say no to it. They're going to have to vote against it, every single one of them. Otherwise, we're going to lose the moral high ground.
We're talking to our guest, Chuck Morse, M-O-R-S-E, and we're discussing about Obamacare and because that's, it's here. And I wanted to ask you about another question regarding this, and you mentioned the constitutional question here. Let me set this up real quickly, and we've talked about this before, maybe for those who haven't heard. This is something that people need to be aware of. All right, folks, we have, you remember your civics class in high school. There's a way to make law in America, whether it's state or national or local, but especially state and national. The legislation has to be passed in the House or the Senate together, and then they send a law to the White House, and then for our national laws, and and then it's signed by the president or vetoed by the president. In this case, Obamacare. Obviously, it's President Obama, so he signed it. It was passed in the House and the Senate along strictly partisan lines. It was all Democrats for it, all Republicans against it in 2010. So, but nevertheless, the law was passed, and dates were assigned to when the implementation of Obamacare would take place on various aspects of Obamacare. Well, what President Obama has decided to do by himself is change the dates of implementation of Obamacare. Now, two things. The reason he's doing this and his administration is doing this is because this is a train wreck waiting to happen, and they think that if they can push it off another year, two, who knows, that they can delay the political consequences of a train wreck to the Democratic Party. That's basically what's going on here. Secondly, the question, Chuck, you raised is, and I haven't heard many people talk about this, once a law is passed and the dates are assigned to implementation of that law, the President of the United States, as powerful as he is, does not have the constitutional authority to arbitrarily change dates. He can't get the white ink out and say, no, we're gonna put this thing into law, whenever I say it's good to put into law, or whenever we're ready. While we may think that's a practical good idea to delay implementation of something because it's not ready, the constitutional, you don't do that. He's not a king. You have to go back to Congress and say, okay, we need to pass an amendment to this law saying that this date has been changed for implementation. It's a precedent that's going on here that really bothers me, that I don't hear enough Republicans speaking up to, and that is a president does not have the right to change the dates on a law by himself. You want to comment on that?
Yes, it is a very serious constitutional question. Obama has a long record of basically ignoring laws or implementing laws. He's ignored the immigration laws as they've been attempted to be implemented in the state of Arizona. He ignored Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which requires that Congress declare war or at least be consulted when he started to launch missiles at Libya. I mean, there's a long line of this with Obama. They are very serious offenses. They are impeachable offenses, and yet, you're right, no one is speaking of it. Republicans are saying nothing about it. I don't understand what's going on in the Republican House, but they're not really acting in a way that defends the Constitution. So you're absolutely right. These are very serious constitutional violations. Clear violations that are not disputable. I mean, it's the president can't just decide to change a date on a law. That's not in, the Congress makes laws in the country. The president signs them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've heard just a handful of Republicans say anything about this at all. And certainly the Democrats aren't going to, but the Democrats should, because we should all be. You would think that lawmakers would recognize when the.
Well, what would have happened? What would have happened, guys, if George W. Bush had done this?
I think he would have been impeached.
Yeah, he'd have been impeached.
He'd be gone.
Or what would have happened had President Obama said, you know what, I'm going to push up the date for implementation. And we're going to make it, August 21st. You know what I'm saying?
The whole thing should have had a smell to it anyway when they implemented the law, but they put off the date of implementation by a year or two. I mean, if the law was so wonderful, why didn't they just implement it right away? That's troubling. A law should be implemented immediately. If it's a good law, let it stand. It was Coolidge's Attorney General Harry Doherty that once said that the best way to get rid of a bad law is to implement it.
What do you think